In the previous tutorial video, we show you how you can use an abstract user interface file as a textual file to automatically generate a starter project for our bank system. So overall, this starter project is going to be a very fast prototype for our bank application. As we gradually develop the business logic inside the model cluster, we'll see how things will work the way that we expect. But for this video here, I just want to show you how you can at least get a feel about how the generated project will actually work from the external user's point of view. Okay, so I assume that you already get access to the generated starter projects over here. So now I already opened that in the iPhone Studio and I already compiled that. It's guaranteed to compile. Okay, so now let's see. There are two ways for you to launch the default project. Let me first point to you an important class over here. If you expand the root class under the root cluster over here and then go to root. Okay, if you look at root class over here, you can see there is a feature called switch. So there are three possible modes that you can switch into. Okay, I will show you the first two, and the third one will be just about how you can do unit testing. I will show you that a little bit later. Okay, so the first one, which is default, which is called a GUI showed history. Basically, the first one is going to, as long as you launch the project, it's going to show you some graphical user interface for your bank system. And the second one, which might be more useful as you build up the test cases, acceptance tests for your projects. So the second one, you really want to switch that into maybe as you work. But the first one will be nice to actually see how things work to get some intuition. So let's keep the first one still is. We'll switch that a little bit later. Okay, so there are two ways to launch the starter project. Either you can simply click on run over here, or you can run it from the command line. I'll show you both. So I can either say run over here, and then it's going to launch the graphical user interface over here. Okay, and then let me just make it a little bigger, and then I will drag your attention to the relevant details. Okay, first of all, you can see that we got three different buttons here. Oh, there's a text box over here to enter whatever events that's going to be initiated by you as a user. And then we got execute to run the command, or we can reset the current history, or we can load from some previous session history. Okay, and then we start with a particular state. Remember, so far everything has just been generated by the ETF tool. You have not, as a programmer, put in any of your logic or code. Okay, that's why everything just by default, just to show you there's something that at least is working. So what you got to do is gradually refine the details for the business logic by yourself. Okay, so by default, we simply show some system states, and then we simply got some integer counter. I will show you in later video how you can modify that counter value to get a feel how things work together. Okay, and also the status text field over here, list of commands or events. So now should be no surprise to you. Remember, the way we generate this current starter projects by ETF is by specifying the abstract user interface specification file over here, bank events. Let's just have a quick look. Okay, as we have seen from the previous video, we got four possible commands or events that can be initiated by the external user of your application. New, deposit, withdraw, and transfer with the relevant parameter types. And if you go back to the GUI over here, new, deposit, withdraw, and transfer, which means when the ETF reads the abstract user interface file in order to generate the starter project, it takes into consideration all the commands or events in the abstract user interface file. Okay, that's why we got these four events exactly, no more and no less. Let's see how we can run this, how we can interact with this GUI over here. Let's do something simple. Okay, what we can do is we can say, for example, I want to do a new. Let's say, oh, by the way, if I simply say new, remember new is expecting an ID of type string. If I simply do new, let's say I put an integer, for example, let's say 23, which is not exactly what we're expecting, right? Because the type doesn't match. If I simply say execute, okay, it's going to tell me it's a type error because 23 is actually an integer which does not match the expected string. So the generated project already got some type checking mechanism already built in the GUI tool. That's why we say it's a very fast prototyping tool for your application. It's not really fancy GUI, but at least we got something that you can get an idea what the ultimate fancy application of your software might be. Okay, so now let's put something out. And also, if you say, for example, I want to put ID, let's say ID1, but I forget about closing the bracket, so it's more like a syntax error. If I say execute, it's going to say syntax error over here, and then you simply have some parse error in this line over here. Okay, so the ETF starter project is going to handle some basic syntax error if you're missing, for example, you're missing a parenthesis, or type error when it is expecting a string but you pass an integer, things like that. Okay, let's now do something that's syntax correct and also type correct. And as soon as we say execute, it's going to show this panel over here is the history panel. The first command or events that has just been executed was the new command initiating ID1. Okay, initializing ID1, account with ID1. And then we can just do another one, but notice that and the current state has been incremented, the counter has been incremented from 0 to 1. We're just showing some change of states by default, right? Nothing very specific to your logic just yet because we haven't added it. Okay, let's just do another one, new, and then we can do ID2. Okay, and then we can say execute. So now I got ID1, ID2. And then let's do one more. Let's say we want to deposit, let's say into ID1, let's say some integer value, right? And then we can say $234, and then we can just say enter, as if we said execute. And now, so far we got 3 events with the system. Okay, so now I want to show you one thing that's going to be very useful if you want to terminate the current run, but you want to rerun whatever you have tested so far. If you go back to your project folder, so this bank is the project folder, and then you will see that under bank, there is a file called session. Okay, if you just open that, not surprisingly, these are exactly the trace of what you have just tested your system with, right? So you can always try to save the session file somewhere handy. So when you are playing with the GUI mode over here, try to play with your application to see what the expected outcome, what the actual outcome is. And then, but later on, you just simply want to save this history over here, but you don't have to just do copy and paste because always there's going to be a session.txt file for you. Okay, so now that's about the GUI mode. You can play with it, and one more command that's always available. You can say man, standing for manual, and then man is going to show you again the list of commands that you can use. Sometimes you may forget about what events are available for your starter projects, so you can always type man, standing for manual, like in Linux, to get the list of commands. Okay, so that's about the GUI mode. I want to show you an alternative way of launching the GUI mode, which is default. Let me just close this over here, and then what I will do is I will go to the command line over here, command prompt. So now I'm currently under my ETF folder and also under bank. So what I will do is I'll try to launch the executable from the W code, from the command line. Okay, I can say fgens, and then I got bank and also W code. And of course, if you finalize your project, you could say F code and bank. Okay, and over here I can simply just type enter, or you can put a ampersand to run it in the background. If I do that, you will see exactly the same GUI mode because it's still the default mode. We haven't changed the switch yet. Now we don't have to start from scratch. What we can do is you can simply say load. And load by default is going to simply load from the previous session over here. That's why it's called session. So make sure if you try to rename your session to other file for your record, make sure there's always a session file over here in order for you to load. The load does not allow you to choose an arbitrary file. It always assumes you got a sessions.txt in the top level of your projects. Okay, so we can say load here, and then if I just try to say maybe transfer from ID1 to ID2, let's say ID1 already got 234. What about we transfer $34? Enter. Okay, I think I might have made some mistake over here. Okay, exactly, you can see there's a typo, so there's no such command. Again, it's a type checking by the starter project. Transfer. As soon as I say that, and see enter, and you can see not only the previous command have been there, but also I append the new command into it. Okay, so now again, you can see the counter initially 0. Now after 1, 2, 3, 4, it has now become 4. Of course, this is only the default behavior by the model under the hood, but we can change it later, as I will show you in the later video. Okay, so that's about the GUI mode. If you really prefer the GUI mode for your development, feel free. However, I would say it's actually more useful to actually try out the other the command line mode, which might appear to be more productive to you, might turn out to be more productive. Let me close this over here. Let me now go to the root class, as we have seen already. So now I want you to override the default mode. I want to say Control K, and then Control Shift K for the next line. And then so now we're gonna recompile. Make sure you recompile, otherwise it's not going to be effectful. As soon as they say compile and it has been succeeded, so now the mode will be the command line for CL. Okay, for the command line, you just don't want to say run anymore. Don't do that. What you should do is go back to the command prompt over here, and then we simply do over here like this. If I simply say this from the ifgen, it tells me that a mode is not specified. Okay, you can go to this --help. So now we're in the command line mode, but for the command line mode, there are also different options you can choose. If you didn't specify any option, it will be considered as an error. So you can simply say this -help. So you can definitely read it through. So these are the available options there, but the one I want to show you, which is more common, one is -I for interactive mode, and also -B for batch mode. That batch mode simply means interactive mode means you can use your keyboard to communicate with the application manually. Batch mode is more for regression testing. So as soon as you are confident with this particular trace that should be tested every time you introduce any new extension or new fix into your software, you want to rerun all the test cases, batch mode will be useful. Okay, let me show you both. Okay, what I will do is, again, I have ifgens over here. So what I would do is I would go to over here, rather than -help option, I would say -I. Let's try the interactive mode. I hit that. It's pretty much like the GUI mode, but now the way I communicate with it is not by button clicks anymore. Okay, so I simply say, if I can say man, it tells me all the commands or events that are available for me to communicate with the application. I can say, for example, new. Oh, okay. So you gotta say new, and then ID1, for example. Okay, you can see the system state changes from 0 to 1 by default. Okay, and then let me just do one more so you get an idea. I can also say new. I can also say deposit, for example. Let's say ID1 into, let's say, $23. Okay, that's also fine. But if I can introduce some error, let's say rather than ID1, I say ID1, 23, another $23. Now it's going to tell me it's a syntax error, but somehow it does not really show me. So ID1 is if that's not in quote, that means it's supposed to refer to some variable name, but there's no such variable. That's why it's considered a syntax error. Okay, and then I can also say deposit. Let's say ID1. Let's say 34. How about that? So which is not a number. So now it will be type error. Okay, so you get an idea. Okay, so now how do I quit from the interactive mode? You can simply say quit, Q-U-I-T. Okay, that's more like an interactive console application for us. Again, that is why we said the original file that we had in order to generate the this current starter project is called abstract user interface. Simply because now you can see the way we interact with your application is by some very primitive, not very fancy user interface. That's sufficient for us to build some quick prototype for your application. Later on, once you're confident and have thoroughly tested your business logic, you can definitely refine such user interface into some fancy one with radio buttons, text boxes, text fields, or maybe spinner, okay, whatever you like. Okay, so now let's see the batch mode. The batch mode is expecting some files for you to run. So for example, how do I automate what I have just done over here? Okay, you can see I did new ID1 and then I do deposit and deposit, right? How do I automate this? What I can do is I can create a new file. Okay, just create a new file. I'm gonna do it over here. What I can do is I can, first of all, ls, I'm now at the top level of the project, I'll go inside tests. And then under acceptance test simply means we are basically tested as if we were the clients for the applications. We don't have as opposed to unit testing. For unit testing, you have to call a particular feature or method inside your code. But for acceptance test, we simply communicate with the system using the user interface events over here. So it's different. So under acceptance, we got, we can simply create. We'll just go there first. And then we have instructor students. Let me just go to instructor. Okay, so currently it's empty. So let me just create some file. You can definitely, of course, you can simply just go to your file system over here, go inside bank, and go inside tests, and then go inside acceptance, go inside instructor. That's exactly where I am. Okay, so now I can simply say touch. Of course, you can just create a file by yourself. I can say AT1 standing for acceptance test number 1. I can say 01.txt. And then over here, I'm just going to open that, okay, at01.txt. And then I can just do exactly what I did before. I can say new over here, ID1. And then I can say ID2. And then I can say deposit into ID1 234, for example. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is you can also, so this is so-called the acceptance file. Okay, so that means each file like AT1, AT2, AT3.txt. So these contain, each one of them contains just a series of user-initiated commands or events that represent a particular test scenario for your application. And you can also put comments over here. You can say by dash, double dash, create a new account with ID1. And I can make a comment for the second one, and the new line doesn't matter. Okay, ID2, and then you can say over here, deposit into the account with ID1, an amount of this is 234. Okay, so we got 3 commands over here. Let's see what we will get by running the batch mode. Okay, so that's the file you can always create, but since it's for testing purpose, I would suggest you create under the acceptance test file folder. Okay, so let's go back there. So now what we can do is, okay, so we are currently inside this acceptance and instructor file. Let's just go to the ifgens. I can go from here, okay, dot, I believe that's it. Okay, ifgens, and then I will go into bank, wcode, bank. Now, rather than -I, I would say -b for the batch mode. And then I can go for AT01.txt. As soon as I hit that, it's going to show me exactly, you can see, right? So what's the advantage of running the batch mode? That means when you are trying to figure out exactly the test cases for each scenario, you can definitely use the GUI mode. You can also use the interactive mode to actually figure out exactly what you need. But to really add those test cases into your repository for regression testing, once you have done that, you better use the batch mode to run every time to run your regression testing, rather than just manually typing the test cases yourself by the keyboard. Okay, so that's how you run the batch mode. Apparently, you can see we go from 0 to 1, 1 to 2, 2 to 3. There's something changing for the states of your system, but this part here somehow has not been overwritten by you as a software developer. You have developed some business logic so that the system state will actually make sense. So that's something we'll show you later in the video series.